Howdy, everybody. Welcome to the Spooky AF podcast. My name is Suz, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rob. Rob, how are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm pretty good. I've had a pretty busy week, and life is just being life. But yeah, I'm good, and I'm very, very excited to be recording today because we've had some back and forth during the week about what we're recording, and yeah, you've hyped me for this one, so I'm looking forward to it. How are you?
Oh yeah, no, I laughed when I asked you how we were because I knew when we first got on our Discord call, we were both like, "God, we're dying and we're old."
Yeah, you've just given a glimpse behind the facade that we put
exactly.
up.
No, I'm doing all right. No, I was really excited to record as well. So before we launch it, I don't think my episode will be too long today. It is really interesting, but I know I was saying that I noticed that I tend to give kind of a where in the world has Suz's media interest been this week, and so one of them was that my husband and I, it was the first time he had seen this film, but we just watched Jennifer's Body.
Oh, very good. I haven't watched that in years, actually.
Yeah, it's from 2009, and it's like peak Megan Fox being like the hottest thing you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
And holy shit, like the world was not ready for like a bisexual succubus, killing small town boys. They weren't ready for it, and we didn't deserve it at the time. But
no, absolutely not. I have a vague memory of seeing that in the cinema. Actually, I think I might have gone to see that with someone.
It is so peak of its time in the sense that, what's funny is I bet kids, if they watched it, if like teenagers watched it now, they would see outfits they can now like go buy again.
Oh God, yeah, it's come back around, hasn't it? Actually.
Oh yeah, because she's wearing low-rise denim miniskirts and it's yeah. The funniest thing about that film though to me is the fact that they thought they could make the audience believe that Amanda Seyfried is an ugly duckling by putting her in a pair of glasses.
It's a simpler time. So
Oh yeah, it was as if Amanda Seyfried isn't as beautiful as Megan Fox in that film, but no, she's the dorky ugly duckling duff one. You look at her glasses.
These are the Twilight years. So it's, they got away with a lot at this point.
They got away with honestly the 2000s and like the 80s kind of have the same vibe of y'all got away with a lot. We let absolutely. A lot slide.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, they definitely they threw a Hail Mary at it for a lot of those films, and they got away with more than they should have.
A Hail Mary and a blue tent, and that was and a prayer, and that was it. That's all they had. So the other piece of media that I've been consuming this week is so we've been really, really loving watching the Interview with the Vampire TV series.
Oh, is it good?
It is incredible. Okay, this is coming from someone whose mother was obsessed with Anne Rice and vampire literature and stuff, so I read that stuff way early on, probably earlier than I should have.
Yeah,
I'm sure when I read it, I read it the first time, and I think even as a child, I was like, oh, this is pretty, there's a lot of queer stuff going on in here. But I was like, I think those men are fucking. But no, and so I've loved it for years, and so we, my husband humored me, and he started watching it, the TV series with me, and he actually loves it as well. It's so well written, and the cinematography's great, the costuming's great, and it really does a good job of properly exploring some really nuanced and interesting things about masculinity and how masculinity is represented.
Very good.
So we were talking about that, and it was really interesting, but I bring it up mainly as a segue into what I'm going to talk about today, is that, Rob, if you know anything about me, you know that I love vampire mythology.
Yes, that is.
The vampire is my thing.
That is very much so your thing.
Oh yeah, my mom loves vampire stuff, so I was into it really early. I think the best TV show that's ever been on TV was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I read Twilight when it came out. I like everything. I like the horror bits. I like.
You had the audience until that last announcement.
I know. Okay. I said I read it. I didn't say anything else. But I love
experienced it.
Yeah. So I love every bit about it. I like the romantic kind of gothic representation of the vampire, like you get in something like Interview with the Vampire. And then I love the punk rock kind of vampire that was in, the Lost Boys or aspects of Buffy. And then I also love the kind of horror end of it in terms of, 30 Days of Night.
Great film.
Exactly,
So
such a
good.
great film. And so I love kind of all these different dimensions of vampires and vampirism and what it means and all that. So today I'm going to go over a thing that I heard about a while back, but hadn't thought about in ages. So Rob, have you ever heard of the New England vampire panic?
I don't know, actually. Maybe?
Maybe.
I'm not sure.
Okay, so there was a very, very real, and people were legitimately terrified of vampirism in New England over
That checks out.
a considerable period of time, but it particularly heightened around something called the Mercy Brown incident in the late 19th century.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That is significantly later than what I thought you were going to say.
Oh, you have no idea what I'm about to get
Oh,
into.
fuck, sis. I thought you were going to be like, yeah, like 16th, 17th century, these people were afraid of vampires.
Oh, no. We're going to get into the history of this. You're going to be like, whoa, we are way too close to the 20th century for this shit to be happening.
Oh, no. Right, okay.
Well, it's a bit like when you find out that that famous case in like West Cork or somewhere down in Wexford or something in Ireland it was something like very close to the 20th century that a woman was murdered by her husband because he thought she was a changeling.
That wasn't very close to the 20th century. That was the 20th century.
I was about to say, I was like, that was really recently.
I think it was in Tipperary, and it was in like 1920 or something.
Exactly. So I'm like, this shouldn't surprise you. Anyway, so I'm gonna go. So my sources are some really well-resourced Wikipedia pages, a really excellent article from the Smithsonian Magazine, particularly from their Distillations podcast, which kind of looks at the strange and esoteric, Heritage Daily, How Stuff Works, NewEngland.com, Haunted Orange County, which seems like a really fun group. Again, I don't know much about them, but they seem like they get together and do like fun haunted outings in California, so I mean, I'd be keen for that.
Amazing.
The American Lung Association and the World Health Organization.
You have done your homework this week. Well done.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
You've listed more sources than I ever have in all of my episodes combined.
What was that thing I sent you this week that I saw and it was so it was saying like, what are your sources? And then the response was just my ass. So I sent that to you.
And I stand by that.
I was like, oh, this is giving some Rob energy.
Look, people are here for a fun time.
Yeah, exactly.
I never promised what I said was the truth.
A fun time, not an honest time.
Yeah.
So I'll jump into some historical context. So what you need to know going into this is a few facts about tuberculosis, or TB. So, and I know, Rob, we've talked about this before in like the Irish context, just kind of chatting.
Again, weirdly a problem in Ireland until worryingly recent times.
Yes, much more recently than I realized when we were talking about it. I remember I was in the car with you and you said a date, and I was like, that was so recently.
Yep.
But so if you did, for listeners who don't know, TB, tuberculosis was so it used to be referred to as consumption back in the day. And you need to know that there was a severe outbreak of it in the 19th century in the northeastern U.S., particularly Rhode Island, eastern Connecticut, southern Massachusetts, and Vermont. And so some general consumption facts and info. So TB is also known as the Great White Plague, which is a reference to the extreme paleness of the affected. So it was a leading cause of death in the U.S. at the turn of the 20th century. And it's often what you kind of think of when you think of like pale Victorian women who are kind of sickly and need to be taken to the seaside, and they're, or that dramatic moment when someone coughs and there's, they pull the handkerchief away and there's blood. That is.
It's always a great reveal. It's that is always a great reveal.
and she died. It's consumption she dies of in Moulin Rouge, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there you go. There's a pop culture touchstone for you. So consumption, or TB, is caused by bacteria that typically attacks the lungs. However, it can affect almost any part of the body, which I didn't know. So it is generally pneumatic, meaning it is spread from person to person through the air, through like sputum or sneezing, coughing, those kind of that kind of transmission. In 2024, TB can typically be treated successfully with medication. However, there are some medication kind of antibiotic resistant strands that are very problematic. And if it's not treated, it can very often be fatal. So the scary thing I discovered about doing research about TB for this episode is that healthy people can contract latent TB, in which the disease may not become active until months or years after exposure. And then boom, things just escalate really quickly and the person can become incredibly ill out of seemingly nowhere.
This was something that I actually unfortunately knew, and I chose not to tell you when we were having our conversation about TB.
Yeah, I am not okay with this at all.
I decided to withhold that little nugget from you.
Oh, God. So, symptoms of TB include a wicked cough, fever, chills, unintentional weight loss, which, I mean, you know, it wouldn't...
Say the thoughts, Suz. Say the
the horribly, like, terrible... I've been conditioned by the patriarchy to be smaller thought. I'm just
I have TB.
Oh no, look at how fucking thin I am. Look at me. Again, we are not promoting unhealthy eating habits. Everybody, just FYI, it was a joke. And another thing is night sweats. So, a total of 1.3 million people died from TB in 2022, and according to the WHO, the World Health Organization, it's so many. It was the second leading infectious killer after COVID-19 per 2023 data.
That checks out.
In fact, ending tuberculosis by 2030 is among the health targets of the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, actually, that sounds familiar enough, actually. That also, isn't it just wild that we still live in a world where this is a genuine concern?
Yeah, well, because when you hear TB, it sounds like a throwback. Like, it sounds like polio or smallpox.
Yeah, it's one of those Victorian diseases.
Yes, 100%. It's like people catching cholera in London. You know, like that kind of, it feels very anachronistic almost. But, so that's, okay, that gives you a bit of background to tuberculosis or consumption and what it is, which will be important as we move forward. So I'm going to start with how modern researchers kind of were reminded that this vampire panic happened. And this is a great article on the Smithsonian Magazine site. So the year is 1990, the year of the birth of Suz. So in a place it was a great year. So in Griswold, Connecticut, there were children playing near a gravel mine because the 80s and 90s couldn't be trusted, and this was pre being able to be chronically online. So all you had were like the children yearned for the mines.
It's true. Like there's just this inherent need in them to return to the mine. Absolutely.
So they're playing near a gravel mine that's kind of set into a local hill in the area, and then naturally, and I would have been so happy as a child, they found a human skull.
Oh fuck yeah! I'm fully invested in this now.
Yes, metal. So
this is some Stand By Me shit immediately.
I was just thinking, this is some Stand By Me, like you want to see a dead body stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's exactly what I'm thinking.
And it like that it almost kind of just gives me a bit more like Florida vibes. But what doesn't?
That's fair. That's fair. It's all the unexpected things give off the Florida vibe.
True, except for human rights, they do not give a Florida vibe.
No, they certainly don't.
No apologies to Florida listeners. You know what you did.
Good for you, Suz. You don't back down from that.
Don't back down.
You start a war with Florida.
Flame war with Florida.
Yeah.
So the kids brought the skull home because of course they did. Because my first thought would be like, oh, did they put like a candle in it in the window? That would have been like metal.
That's some witchy shit right there.
So it was the parents turned it into local authorities who were obviously concerned that there was a clandestine grave or that was the body of perhaps a missing person, and it could indicate foul play. So
could you just imagine being one of those parents, like just having a totally normal day, just going about your business, whatever it is a 1990s parent does at that time, probably thinking about communism or something, smoking.
Yeah, smoking indoors. That was important.
Oh, of course. Well, where else are you going to smoke? The smoke will get out of the house otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. That's why so many homes, had the yellow wallpaper because it wasn't yellow to begin with.
Exactly. It's just that it's of its time.
Oh,
and just imagine being a parent just sitting there doing whatever it is you're doing, and then your child just comes home and is like, oh, how's your day? Yeah, it was great. Yeah, what'd you get up to? Oh, we just went around the gravel mine. You can imagine like parent being like, I told you you're not allowed to go out there.
Yep.
And they're like, yeah. So I found a head.
found a, and you know, at the time, so I think it was a little boy that found the skull, and you can imagine him having a younger sister at home, and she's playing with that 1990s Barbie that had roller skates that as you pushed it along, it threw off sparks off the back of the skates.
100%. Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
that is peak 1990s.
He potentially showed her first, and she was like, "I'm telling mom."
Oh yeah, the bar for PTSD in 1990 for you know, kind of the everyday horrors was so different than it is today.
Absolutely.
Like,
It's just fucking skulls just out lying everywhere. You know?
It's like he brought home the skull, and she was like, "Yeah, well, I started a civil war with my Barbies and lit them on fire." And you know, they were just having dark thoughts.
Yeah, well, you know, who hasn't?
Who
at some point. You
who
know?
hasn't done that? They were Knuff.
Absolutely, they were 100%. And on over here we had Action Man. I'm assuming you had Action Man as well in the States.
Oh, that is not something that is ringing as a cultural touchstone for me.
Oh my god!
I'm
This
not
is
saying
amazing.
it didn't exist. I'm just saying I don't.
No.
remember
I'm
it.
saying, oh my god, as in I'm so just. This is a phenomenal. Action Man is basically like it was. Basically, it was Barbie targeted towards guys, like towards boys. And it was like, this dude, he's a soldier. You could buy all his guns. He's got like camo and everything. But there's also like all different versions of him. So there's like Karate Action Man. There's like Special Forces Action Man. All of these different ones.
Action Man was just pseudonym for violence masculinity, right?
100%. Like 100%. And like, I, as a child, 100% drank that Kool-Aid happily.
Oh yeah, you were like, I can kill you with guns, I can kill you with nunchucks, I can kill you with the slingshot, I can...
Yeah, absolutely. Action Man was unbelievable. I am actually going to send you some Action Man stuff after we record, just so you can see how bonkers it was.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm going to send you the original advert for the Barbie that had the skates that threw off sparks, because you are speaking to someone who owned that Barbie. My house in the ghetto in Texas, we had kind of open gas heating, which is hilarious, because if you have a doll that's throwing off sparks in a gas-filled home, I'm surprised we made it out. Like, we could have gone up like a meth lab.
Look, it just keeps it interesting, you know? Every day, it's just rolling the dice.
My mom probably pulled me aside and said, "We're gonna go with the meth lab story. You hear me?
At least people on the street will think we're cool.
Yeah, so we're not gonna go with the Barbies destroyed the home." Anyway, little boy brings skull to parent, as they do. So they obviously turned it into the authorities. Authorities did an investigation, which, I mean, the equivalent of a police investigation in the 1990s in rural, Connecticut. I'm just imagining, you know, a guy with a thick mustache. Oh, I'm thinking of, because wasn't that maybe it'd be a little bit later than Mahershala Ali's season of True Detective, where they're basically half drunk on the job.
Yeah,
and,
pretty much.
Yeah, and they're just touching everything with their bare hands aggressively.
Well, how else are you going to get a feel for the case?
That's true. How else are you gonna, the vibes of the case can only be transferred by touch.
100%. That's how, you know, the case has to pass the vibe check before they'll take it on.
I'm sure they got the skull and they thought, you know what, let me lick it. Let me see what I can pick up.
Yeah, well, it's the same rules for like cocaine that they find in films as well. It's like, how else are you going to know it's cocaine except for like taking a horrific amount of it in your mouth? I
will say those scenes always make me laugh because I want them to put some on their finger, rub it on their gums, and go, baby powder. Like to say something different.
I just also love for them though to do it, like rub it around the gums, and they'd be like, "Nah, this is some weak ass shit."
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, how do you know that?
I think this has been cut with like Sephora powder foundation. Like, my gums have never looked better, but I'm not high.
Yeah. My gums are so matte right now.
The T-zone area of my gums is so taken care of. Oh my god. Rob, we need help. Where have we gone? Okay.
Yeah, okay, so we've got a mustached police officer
who's licking human bones.
Mustache. Yeah.
Okay.
Dealing with this case.
So he licked the human bones and decided that it wasn't, you know, they were very old bones. It was clearly like a historical death, and it was probably probably a job for a historian and an archaeologist and those kind of nerd researchers. So they called in academia, and so the space was identified. There were 29 burials around there, which for the most part were quite typical of sort of 1700 and to early 1800s New England, where there would have been a lot of unmarked family plots kind of all over the place. However, burial number 4 is where things got interesting. So as the researchers lifted large stone slabs that had been covering the remains of burial number 4, they discovered that the skeleton had been beheaded, and the skull and thigh bones were resting on top of the ribs and vertebrae, making it look like what the lead archaeologist called a skull and crossbones motif, or kind of like the Jolly Roger on a pirate flag.
So, as someone with an archaeology degree, I'm telling you right now, you lift up that stone tablet and you see that, you fucking put it back.
Because that is how you get cursed, right?
You look at each other, you basically have a gentleman's agreement right there where no words are spoken, you all just nod, put the fucking thing back, close it over, and bury it.
Did you send me that reel or that TikTok of the guy, uncovering this box, like they were doing archaeology, and then she was like, put it back, put the box back.
She's like, yeah, what are you doing? Put it back.
Put it back in the ground. What are you doing?
Yeah.
That was so funny. So that's what happened. So they did further testing on this particular skeleton, and it actually had further injuries, particularly they had several rib fractures in sort of around the inner ribs, which they could pinpoint through whatever testing was going on in the 1990s, that probably occurred approximately 5 to 10 years after the death of the individual.
Interesting.
So these were post-mortem rib fractures, and the coffin had also been smashed.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And did they determine that the coffin had been smashed like around the same time? Is that what they kind of figured? Or
I do not have further information other than the coffin had been smashed. However, we know that part of the coffin was still intact, and I'll tell you why. So the particular skeleton they concluded was of a sort of roughly 50-year-old-ish man from the 1830s, they think. And they believe that the initials of this individual were JB because they were etched into the coffin lid. So clearly part of the coffin lid was still intact.
Yep.
And researchers from multiple academic disciplines were called in to kind of figure out what happened and why the skeleton was in the state that it was in. So while they were, I can only imagine the 1990s when academia was a space where you got your PhD and that means that you were the best and you got a job immediately. You just parked yourself at a university for the rest of your life. So they were all standing around the water cooler.
Wait, you mean it's not like that now? It's modern academia.
Rob, that is triggering for both of us. How dare you?
That's the real spooky shit out there.
Oh God, that's the most unbelievable part of the series A Discovery of Witches, is not the fact that witches, vampires, and demons exist. It's the fact that she, at the age of 30, had a tenure track position at Yale.
That's the most unbelievable part.
Reading that series and then watching the television series, both of which I highly recommend. They're very entertaining. But that was where I was like, you know what, I'm out.
Yeah, wasn't there... That just reminded me as well of, I think, and I don't even know why I'm surprised by this, but I think there was a Dan Brown book, one of the female leads in this, because how...
Was it the one who's working at CERN, and she's 28 or something? Oh,
she's 28, but she's got 2 PhDs or something, and...
It's Angels and Demons, I think. I think it's Angels and Demons.
Yeah, she's got 2 PhDs, she's a professor, she's already just casually disproven loads of Einstein stuff and theorems and theories.
Oh, yeah, she's created, moderate-sized black holes at that, at CERN, and...
Yeah.
Oh, but she also has time to be exceptionally beautiful and dress well and all these other things.
Yeah. Dan Brown, phenomenal author. Great. Really knows how to write the female leads.
Oh, God, I know. She still managed to walk down the stairs boobily.
Yeah, 100%. I will send you, Suz, this article afterwards that was written a few years ago, and it's talking about a day in the life of Dan Brown, but the journalist writing it wrote it in the style of Dan Brown.
Oh my God. So is it a new chapter every paragraph?
It's fucking phenomenal. It's just incredible. People should look that one up if they're interested. Just Google Dan Brown journalist article or something. You'll definitely find it straight away. I have a confession to make. Dan Brown is one of my guilty pleasures.
I know. I really enjoy. I remember at the time I really enjoyed reading them.
Yeah, no, they're so like yeah. Well, I enjoy reading them because they scratch a part of my brain that I didn't realize needed to be scratched. Yeah, sorry, I'm distracting you too much. Let's go on.
It's fine. We're tired, and you can tell we are going down some weird roads. Okay, so we are in the lab, and the researchers are all talking about like why the hell does the skeleton look the way it does, and has these postmortem injuries, and in an otherwise, because the other 28 bodies or skeletons in the area were very normal. Like there was nothing weird about them. And then one of the researchers, which immediately tells me this researcher would have been like our homie, because he just pipes up and says, "Has anybody heard of the Jewett City vampire incident?" which is absolutely something that we would just throw into conversation.
Wish beyond all hope that this person listens to our podcast, because they are one of us.
100%. You know, they were like, "Oh my god, this is my moment." So, the Jewett City vampire incident was where basically a number of corpses were documented to have been exhumed because they were suspected of being vampires that were rising from their graves to kill the living.
Yeah.
So, in this context, it was then proposed that the damage to JD's skeleton was caused by his accusers rummaging around in his chest cavity, hoping to remove and destroy his heart.
That all checks out, yeah.
It will all check out because we're about to get into the vampire panic of New England proper and why this was, because that is probably what happened, and it's wild. So I'm going to go into some early cases of essentially of people believing that that vampires were real because someone would die often of tuberculosis because this was something that was plaguing the populations at the time. And then somebody else in their family, for example, would come down with tuberculosis. And they would think, well, it must be the dead person is coming back and giving them, basically the tuberculosis is acting as almost a type of vampirism. Which is so different, because when you think of vampirism, you think of it being almost closer to like a sexual succubi kind of thing, rather than this very kind of illness-inspired.
Yeah. That's mad interesting, actually, and in a weird way would also, like, for me anyway, I could see that being almost more believable, like, because you've got this, like, very clear, real sickness. Because the victims of it become so pale and so weak over time until they kind of fade away. They die. And that's all it would take is like one person basically being like, look, there's the signs, like they're getting paler, they don't want to go outside, 100%. They're afraid of the sun, all that sort of shit.
One thing I need to preface is that this belief that vampires could be kind of feeding off the living after a loved one has died is really popular in Europe. But it was kind of a few centuries before this. Because like I said, this is almost anachronistic of when it's happening. Because basically Europe kind of looked, and I will get into it, Europe kind of heard about this, and they thought, well, that's a bit silly. They were like, okay, like, America, get your shit together. We got over this hundreds of years ago. We stopped burying our bodies upside down. So firstly, I guess I'm going to go into some general steps that were taken to ward off a vampire from rising. So in New England. So there was a whole slew of things they used to do in Europe in various cultures, but this is kind of more what they were doing in America. So bodies were regularly being exhumed and all internal organs ritually burned to stop the vampire from rising and feeding off the locals, particularly the heart and the liver. So,
I mean, to be fair, like, they're not doing it right if they need to do it more than once.
They're like, it was the pancreas that was powering her. Damn it. Who would have thought her spleen was where the evil lived?
Always knew that pancreas was giving off mad vampire energy.
It does surprise me that they didn't think, it was her womb, which must have been up by her forehead, and we should get it out and burn it.
Now we know what the appendix was really for.
So in some cases, particularly in Maine and Plymouth, Massachusetts, they opted to flip the exhumed vampire face down and call it a day. As in, almost like a vampire's a reverse turtle. Like if you flip it on its stomach and
just ass up in the air, just...
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Fair.
Sorry, again, short sidebar because that's just this kind of episode. I heard the most upsetting Gen Z sentence that I had to use ChatGPT to decipher, and I'm going to share it with you. I know. The sentence is, sticking out your gat for the Rizzler, you're so skibbity, you're so phantom tax. And I honestly thought I didn't speak English because it's not English.
I'm sorry.
So I had to.
I know Gyat is ass.
Yeah,
I
Gyat
do
was
know
ass.
that.
Well, then the Rizzler is like the ultimate Riz guy. So, yeah, so kind of a big player, I guess.
Look, Gen Z don't really listen to us anyway, so look, it's fine.
So exactly, this is fine. So, and then Phantom Tax was based on a Twitch streamer, I think, who steals his friend's food and calls it like a tax, and his name is Phantom. So then it's kind of evolved into the term Phantom Tax is when you take your friend's food.
That's mad scummy, but okay.
Yeah, so sorry, I just had to say that because when I read that sentence, I've never been more confused.
I'm still confused.
So yeah, to be fair. So on that note, so they would flip the vampires on their bellies and didn't do anything. So many records indicate that the dead person's heart and liver would be burned, and sometimes, and then this is proper occult crazy shit, the sick living relative or relation would be prompted to inhale the fumes from the flames of the burning heart or liver. That is some insane occult shit.
So hygienic as well.
Oh God, can you imagine? Yeah. All right, now bend over the flame and breathe in your mother's heart.
No, you're not huffing hard enough.
So there were some others that even had their feet bound with thorns to keep them in the grave.
Right there.
Oh yeah.
Actually, this whole thing has been fairly metal so far, except for the reverse term thing.
But here we go. So this could even be a festive community event. So for example, in 1793, there was a public heart-burning ceremony at the local blacksmith's forge.
Look, if the event is on, you gotta go. You know, like
this is what we had before short-form content.
You know who doesn't go to that?
Who?
Vampires.
True. You know who doesn't go to that? People on TikTok.
Fucking nerds.
Fucking nerds. So the town records stated that the vampire in that particular festive community event had been, quote, sucking the blood of the living wife of Captain Burton, and, end quote, it was the month of February, and there was, quote, good slaying, as in like snow slaying, not vampire slaying. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
No.
Damn. Didn't realize this is down the Blade.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, this is the mayor is Buffy and like the comptroller is Blade, but which, God, that's a new sentence too. Jesus.
I'm just picturing now like the blacksmith's building. It's just playing that music from the club scene in Blade, but like Eurodance. Just
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, that's a throwback. But no, so yeah, I just love that they were like, yeah, so we had a public heart-burning ceremony. It was February, therefore the sledding was also good.
Yeah, you know what? Like at some points I'm really glad that we've moved away from this, but then I also kind of go like, damn, we've moved away from this.
We moved away from this. Like this was, you could have been part of a community.
That's exactly it.
You know?
Like, the whole community spirit has been
lost.
Oh yeah. You know, it was when we stopped burning hearts.
It was exactly when we stopped burning hearts. So there were also other things that people could point to say, there's like that person's definitely a vampire. The main one was that when they would exhume them, they would like cut open the heart or liver looking for signs of blood, which depending on when they cut them open, like yes, there's going to be remnant blood and clotting and all that in there anyway. But there was other things like, so graves that had no grass or flowers grow on them were considered to be signs that a vampire
just
was
imagining
buried
like
there.
a freshly buried grave, and they're like, "There's no grass or flowers."
Oh God! Well, then I'm also thinking. I grew up in Central West Texas. I mean, there's no grass a lot of places. So I'm going to go over a couple of early cases, and then I'm going to go into kind of the most well-known incident of this. Some early cases in America included the case of one of the earliest known cases of kind of New England vampirism is that of Rachel Harris, who died of consumption in 1790, and then a year after her death, her husband, Captain Isaac Burton, married her stepsister. Keep it in the family. Whose name was Hulda, which is not the most attractive name. I'm just gonna. No offense to anybody out there named Hulda. If we have a listener named Hulda, can you please comment? I would be really interested to hear about that. Anyway.
Yeah, we'll retract Suz's comment if you get in touch with us.
Oh, 100%. Once I know someone named Hulda, I'm sure they're lovely, and it's fine. Yeah. So, again, Hulda began to get sick, similar to Rachel, because she probably caught consumption. But, that wasn't thought of. But the family and friends reasoned that Rachel, who is dead, must have been the culprit. So in 1793, more than 500 Manchester residents in February, braved the weather to watch the liver, heart, and lungs of Rachel be removed from her corpse and burned on a blacksmith's forge.
That checks out.
Again, there just wasn't
it's just
shit
mad.
the fuck
It
to
just
do,
also
was there?
just boggles my mind how terrified people were of women at this time.
Oh my god, yeah. Well, it goes further. So apparently, some sources suggest that portions of Rachel's organs were preserved to make a medicine for Huldah.
No.
And weirdly,
why stop there?
She still died.
Shockingly,
Well, because if she didn't have tuberculosis before, after eating the decayed organs of someone who died of tuberculosis, including the lungs, I'm sure exactly. She did then. But so following her death, did the people think, oh, maybe it wasn't a vampire? No, they just decided that Rachel, the first wife that died, wasn't a vampire. She was a witch.
Ah, of course. Yeah, that
and then
makes sense.
there's lots more, and these dates sound more reasonable because it's the 1780s, the 1790s, but then you start getting into the mid to late 1800s, and you're like, aren't we kind of like we're living in the early capitalist nightmare? Can we move beyond this?
Yeah, that is a bit worrying there.
Yeah, 100%. And so I did want to say one thing. There was a case in 1799 of Sarah Tillinghast, and there's nothing really notable about it except for the fact that this line, she was the first of Snuffy Tillinghast's 14 children to die. I read that sentence and have so many questions.
Yeah, fair play through.
Yep. So now I'm going to get into what other people may know of as this is the case that sparked the interest in New England vampirism, and this is the Mercy Lena Brown incident. So it happened in Rhode Island, and again, it's probably the most famous case of this that was reported on in the media, and it is kind of a bonkers story. So it happened in Exeter, Rhode Island, which was a largely subsistence farming community with very rocky and barely fertile soil, which sounds great. Its population had been devastated by the Civil War, and many other families had then just moved away looking for more fertile pastures. So again, farming village, you can imagine like a small I think at the time that this happened, there was maybe only like 800 people in the area, so it was very, very small, very rural. We're in the last decades of the 19th century. So the Brown family fell ill with TB in December 1882. Mercy Lena's mother and sister died in just a couple of years, and then Mercy Lena developed symptoms a decade later, so she kind of had the latent version. And she herself became very ill and died in 1892. However, while Mercy...
Wow, so she lasted quite a while.
She did, yeah. Well, for a long time, she didn't have any symptoms at all. And then it wasn't until, I think, like 1890 or 1891 that she actually became sick. So at this point, I believe that there's left alive, there's the father, George Brown, Mercy Lena, and then I think she had an older brother, Edwin, might have been a younger brother, but a brother, Edwin, nonetheless. So when Mercy was dying, several locals went to her father to suggest that it was something demonic, and that was draining his child, and later children, Edwin would get sick as well, and that his deceased wife and daughter may not be so deceased and were basically killing his living kids. They suggested that their bodies, that George agree for the bodies to be exhumed to check for fresh blood in their hearts and livers. And George Brown said, okay.
Yeah.
Of
course
he's going to get actually more interesting. But so they do it. They exhume the bodies. And again, the mother and sometime in here, Mercy died. Like she also died. And it's important it was January when Mercy died. So the mother and older sister were just skeletons by this point. Essentially, they'd been buried for more than a decade. However, the winter weather meant that Mercy Lena's body was actually pretty intact because the ground was cold and frozen. And for a while, she'd actually even been stored in an above ground crypt because the ground was so frozen they literally couldn't dig her a grave. So, but they didn't remember that. That was convenient for them.
I had a feeling this is where this was going.
Exactly. So they removed her heart and her liver and burned them on a nearby rock. The ashes were then fed to her sick brother, who weirdly died 2 months later. And I'm starting to think, was it the tuberculosis or was it the organ ash?
Yeah.
That's the real question.
This is just fucking mental.
Yes, well, it's the whole thing of, they're not feeling well. Maybe we should remove some of their blood.
Yeah, well, look, you have to check off everything. You know?
Oh, yeah. So the case of the Brown family, so late in the 19th century, baffled city folk. It was reported on newspapers and discussed widely at the time, with many people thinking it was weird and really anachronistic even at the time. I mean, and if you've got people in 1895 or what have you in their, ridiculous bustle skirts and corsets that are crushing women's organs and, giving people cocaine for a headache, and they're like, this seems unscientific.
We can't possibly try to understand the thought process at the time.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It would have been great to be around. As someone who also often has a headache, I would love to be. I'm sure I'd love to be given cocaine for it regularly.
Stop! I'm right there with you. That was actually the first thought that came into my head. Yeah. I just didn't say it.
But basically, they're like, this is harkening back to an age that we left behind. Like, we are modern people now. We shouldn't be doing this. This is folklore. This is ridiculous. This is barbaric. Notably, George Brown, so Mercy's father, didn't believe in vampires. And according to the Providence Journal, he authorized the exhumations of his family only to satisfy the neighbors. Like, he didn't even show up for the exhumation because he was like, it doesn't matter, they're fucking dead. He's like, my family, my kids are dying.
That's so interesting that he basically just did it to satisfy the community. I wonder if it was a case of he was trying to do it to move suspicion off them or something, kind of
maybe
there's enough people in the community suspecting it or something. That
you also have to think that maybe he was at a point though that all of his kids are dead, his wife is dead, and he's probably just like, what,
exactly,
get on with my fucking
he's
life.
Had a tough run as is.
He's like, I have no idea what I'm even doing right now. If you want to go, exhume my family's bodies to, drive a stake through their hearts, be my guest.
Just please leave me alone.
I also love the fact that he didn't show up. He's like, yeah, you can do it, but I'm not going to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a bit of a flex.
Yeah.
So, like I said, there was lots of media shared around the case. There was a New York World clipping that found its way, and this is really interesting. So, it found its way into the papers of a London stage manager and amateur novelist named Bram Stoker, who would go on to publish his famous novel Dracula in 1897. So there is some suggestion that this could have been part of the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula.
For sure. And actually, a callback for one of our earliest episodes. Yes. If people want to listen to another mention of Bram Stoker, it's our Halloween special from October last year. Go ahead and listen to it, and you'll hear about some of the Irish origins for Dracula.
Absolutely. So that was the Mercy Brown kind of incident. So vampire panics, they seem to occur for much longer in America than they do in Europe, even if they were widely criticized even within America. Authors like Henry David Thoreau wrote in his journal in 1859 about how barbaric the practice was and how, come on people, it's just TB, and they need to do the equivalent of getting off they damn phones. It was, really, he's basically saying y'all are chronically online and it shows. Y'all have some real main character energy and you need to calm down.
Go touch some grass.
Go touch some grass, get off book talk, just breathe. And if you think about it, there's been a lot of really interesting discussions and books published on the subject, academic books and history books talking about how it was very classist in nature and it was very... it was focused in rural areas often, and so it talked about the kind of disparate cultures that were developing in and kind of clashing in America during this period as we moved into the 20th century. It also brings up uneasy tensions between humans and religion, folklore, disease, and media, because you can kind of just assume that a lot of these were in a way to try and affect some kind of hold over death or some kind of make it make sense, make it reasonable, when really it was just this tragic epidemic that was slaughtering millions. So the other references to this kind of New England vampire panic occur in pop culture include H.P. Lovecraft's The Shunned House and this is what I'm going to end on, and a Monster Quest episode entitled Vampires in America.
Brilliant. Pinnacle there of research into it.
Yep. So I encourage people to read it. There were some really great books by academics and just kind of history buffs talking about it. Again, it's a very kind of its time in a sense that a lot of the primary sources are newspaper articles, which is really interesting. And yeah, and it made it over to Europe, and a lot of Europeans were like, y'all are ridiculous.
This is wild.
This shit is wild. But yeah, I always just found that story really interesting and kind of a different take on what we in popular culture mostly deal with when we hear vampire narratives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something different. And what we were saying at the start is like you could almost see TV being more believable in converting people to believing in it. Like it basically like it covers off all of the physical attributes of a vampire.
Yeah, and it's decidedly unsexy, which is also kind of unusual.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, and I suppose with TV there's already enough fear around it, so it would be believable that it's not that difficult to go a step further.
Well, yeah, it's a bit. I mean, because one of the future episodes that I really want to do, there are some really interesting, spooky things that were kind of talked about around the time of the plague, like the bubonic plague, but it's a bit similar to that in the sense that, yeah, of course you would think like a god was angry at you and was delivering this supernatural pestilence that was a black death sweeping through the population, because what else are you? It's like when caveman saw a rainbow or the eclipse. Of course you thought the world was ending. What the fuck else would you think?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm curious to see in another few years what the paranormal creatures were that people thought were going to come out of COVID.
Oh God. Well, see, when you say paranormal creatures now, I just get this image of Conehead Bigfoot, undergrad student at Texas Tech with the cigarettes wrapped under his shirt sleeve. Forever in our hearts. But yeah, so that's a quick synopsis and look at the New England vampire panic. Again, super interesting and pretty weird, I think.
Yeah, it's cool. Thank you for this. I really enjoyed this one. This is a really different vampire case, which is always good to see. It's so funny as well, as we were saying, like how it is a good bit later than what we would have thought. But I suppose like in the context of what was going on at the time and like just general public hysteria, can totally see how all it takes is only a few people to believe it.
It was caused by a disease. I said like the hysteria was kind of prompted by the tuberculosis outbreak, and then they thought the solution was to, what I'm sure was very barehanded, reach into the cavities of dead bodies and pull out organs. Which is the most hygienic thing you've ever done.
Oh yeah, there was nothing clean about that.
Oh yeah, and then huff them, or then huff the ashes.
Yeah, you got to smoke that shit.
Oh god,
it draws like a pencil.
I'm sure now they'd be vaping it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's just a cloud.
Like, hold on,
I
gotta switch out my strawberry vape juice for this.
Sorry, my elf bar needs to be replaced.
Oh god.
My watermelon's done. I got to replace it with sister's lungs.
Now I'm just thinking of a kid with a skin fade and a tracksuit, again, vaping at a bus stop, and somebody being like, "What is that smell?" I'd be like, "Don't judge. My sister just died." Oh god, that's the Dublin vampire panic.
Yeah, with that like broccoli haircut.
Oh my god, yes, the broccoli haircut.
Well, that's I think a phenomenal way to end our episode.
Absolutely.
Vaping vampires' ashes.
Yeah, I'm gonna say. To everyone, go touch some grass if you can. Get off your phone for a bit after you've looked up some interesting facts about the New England vampire panic. Go watch Interview with the Vampire. Super gay, super well done, super awesome. And have a good week for whenever you're listening to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Enjoy whatever it is that you're doing when you're listening. I actually we've gotten some messages from people, and it's great to see. Some people are like, the short episodes, I love listening to them with a cup of coffee. I'm like, oh, that's great. And then someone else will be like, I don't listen to the long episodes unless I'm driving in the car. I'm like, all right, okay, that's good to hear.
Fair enough.
I guess. Yeah.
Whatever. See, we like to. We're diverse. We like to, however you want to listen to us, like, let us know. We're interested. I will say that the one comment you sent me by that great user, she did the emojis for penis legs, and I couldn't remember from the sleep paralysis episode, and I couldn't remember in what context I said that, so I had to go back and listen to the episode because I was like, "What? How did I get to that?"
You were on a roll. I gotta give you that was a great episode.
but yeah, no, I was pleased to know that in some weird way it did make sense in context.
It did, absolutely. And you've spawned emojis of it now, so well done.
All right, so everybody have a great week, stay spooky, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Take it easy. Bye.